My dad told me if I marry my fiancé, I won't inherit my share of the family farm. My siblings are siding with him because they want bigger portions if I'm cut out. I'm the youngest of 3 kids in a farming family. Our farm has been in the family for over 120 years, passed down through 5 generations. It's not just land to us, it's our identity, our history, our everything. My great-great-grandfather cleared this land with his bare hands during the Depression. Every fence post, every field, every building holds memories of our family's sweat and sacrifice. Growing up, I was the one who truly loved the farm. While my older brother Jake, 34, and sister Emma, 32, complained about chores and couldn't wait to escape to town every weekend, I was the kid begging Dad to let me drive the tractor, helping Mom with the books, and dreaming about modernizing our operations. I studied agricultural business in college, specifically, so I could come back and help run things more efficiently. But life had other plans. During my junior year, I met Marcus. He was doing his master's in environmental engineering, and we were paired up for a sustainability project. I still remember the first time he smiled at me in the library, this warm, genuine smile that made my stomach flip. Marcus is everything my family isn't. He's mixed race, Black and Korean. Grew up in foster care in Detroit, worked 3 jobs to put himself through school, and has never seen a cow up close, let alone milked one. But he's also the kindest, most intelligent, hardest working person I've ever met. He listens when I talk about crop rotation like it's the most fascinating thing in the world. He learned to drive stick shift just so he could help me move. When I got food poisoning from bad gas station sushi, he drove 4 hours to bring me soup and stayed up all night making sure I was okay. He makes me laugh until my sides hurt, and he loves me in a way that makes me feel like I can conquer the world. We've been together for 7 years now, lived together for 3, and got engaged 6 months ago. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. I should have known my family's reaction would be complicated, but I was naive enough to think love would win out in the end. The first red flag was when I brought Marcus home for Christmas 3 years ago. Dad barely looked at him during introductions, and when Marcus offered to help with evening chores, Dad just grunted and said, "City boys don't know nothing about real work." Mom was polite but cold, asking pointed questions about his people and where he really came from. My siblings mostly ignored him, except when Jake made some comment about how different things were getting around here. But Marcus handled it all with more grace than they deserved. He helped Mom with dishes without being asked, fixed a broken fence gate that had been bothering Dad for months, and even got our ancient tractor running when it wouldn't start. By the end of the visit, I thought things were improving. Dad actually shook his hand goodbye, and Mom packed him leftover pie. I was so wrong. Over the years, the subtle digs continued. Comments about Marcus not being farm material, jokes about city boys and book learning, questions about whether he'd ever really understand our way of life. When I got my first promotion at the agricultural consulting firm where I work, Dad's first comment wasn't congratulations, it was, "Bet that boyfriend of yours is happier making more money." But I pushed through because I loved Marcus, and I thought I could change their minds given enough time. Marcus never complained, even when my family's coldness was obvious. He just kept showing up, kept being himself, kept loving me despite everything. The engagement announcement 6 months ago was when everything went to hell. I called my parents on a Sunday evening, bursting with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I have amazing news." Marcus proposed. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Well, I guess we need to have a talk." "A talk?" I laughed nervously. "About what?" "Aren't you happy for me?" "Come home next weekend," Mom said quietly. "We'll discuss it then." That was the longest week of my life. Marcus could see I was worried, but I brushed off his concerns. "They just need time to adjust to the idea," I told him. "They'll come around." The family dinner from hell happened the following Saturday. Mom made all my favorites: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, apple pie. I should have known she was buttering me up for something bad. Jake and Emma were there with their spouses and kids. The whole extended family gathered around the old oak table that's been in our dining room since the 1940s. It felt like a tribunal. Dad waited until after dessert to drop the bomb. "Sarah," he said, his voice unusually formal, "your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking since you called." "About the wedding?" I asked hopefully. "I was thinking maybe we could have it here on the farm. The south pasture would be beautiful in." "There won't be any wedding here," Dad interrupted. The table went dead silent. Even the kids stopped chattering. "What do you mean?" My voice came out as a whisper. Dad looked me dead in the eyes. "If you marry that boy, you will be written out of the will. No share of the farm. Nothing." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Dad, what are you?" "This farm has been in our family for over a century," he continued, his voice growing harder. "Every generation has sacrificed to keep it going, to pass it down to their children. I will not watch it be destroyed by someone who doesn't understand what it means, what it represents." "Marcus doesn't want to destroy anything," I said desperately. "He loves me. He respects what we—" "He's not one of us," Dad cut me off. "He never will be. And if you choose him over your family, over your heritage, then you're not one of us either." I looked around the table frantically, searching for an ally. Mom was staring at her hands. Jake and Emma were avoiding my eyes. Their spouses looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. "This is insane," I said, my voice cracking. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," Dad replied. "The farm gets divided 3 ways when your mother and I pass. But if you go through with this marriage, it becomes 2 ways. Jake and Emma understand what's at stake here." That's when my siblings finally spoke up, and it was worse than their silence. "Dad's right, Sarah," Emma said quietly. "You left us. You moved to the city, you barely visit, and now you want to bring in someone who has no connection to this place, no understanding of what we've built." "I left for college," I protested. "And I work in agriculture. Everything I do is connected to farming." "You work in an office," Jake said flatly. "When's the last time you actually worked this land? When's the last time you got your hands dirty?" "I've been trying to help. I've sent you reports on soil optimization, crop rotation schedules, suggestions for—" "Paper," Jake interrupted. "You send us paper. Meanwhile, Emma and I have been here, working with Dad, learning the business, raising our kids on this land." "Your kids," I said, the words tasting bitter. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You want your kids to inherit bigger shares." Emma's face flushed. "Don't you dare make this about money." "Then what is it about?" I shouted, finally losing my composure. "Because it sure as hell isn't about love or family. It's about preserving something sacred," Mom said quietly, speaking for the first time. "This farm, this legacy, it's bigger than any one person's happiness." "So my happiness doesn't matter?" "Of course it matters," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. "But some things matter more." I sat there in stunned silence, looking at these people who had raised me, who had taught me to value loyalty and family above all else, who were now demanding I choose between the man I loved and everything I'd grown up believing was mine. "I need to think," I whispered. "Don't think too long," Dad said. "Marcus seems like a nice enough young man, but nice isn't enough. If you marry him, you're choosing a life that doesn't include us." I drove home that night in a haze, my mind reeling. Marcus was waiting up for me, a cup of tea ready and a concerned expression on his face. "How did it go?" he asked gently. I broke down and told him everything. I watched his face as I repeated my family's ultimatum, saw the hurt and anger flash in his eyes, followed quickly by something that looked like resignation. "Maybe they're right," he said quietly when I finished. "What?" I looked at him in shock. "Maybe I'm not good enough for you. Maybe I would ruin your future." "Don't you dare," I said fiercely, grabbing his hands. "Don't you dare let them make you think you're not worthy. They're wrong, Marcus. They're so incredibly wrong." But I could see the doubt creeping in, and it broke my heart. The next few weeks were torture. My phone rang constantly, siblings calling to check in, extended family members who had somehow heard about the situation offering their unsolicited opinions, and family friends expressing their concern about my choices. Jake called one evening while I was making dinner. "Sarah, you need to think about this logically," he said without preamble. "Dad worked his ass off his whole life to build something that could support all of us. Do you really want to throw that away for a guy you've known for 7 years? I love him, Jake. You loved Billy Henderson in high school too, but you got over that. This is not the same thing, and you know it. Is it?" His voice grew sharper. "How do you know this Marcus guy isn't just using you? He comes from nothing, and suddenly he's engaged to a woman whose family owns hundreds of acres of prime farmland. Because I know him," I said through gritted teeth. "Because he's never once asked about the farm or inheritance or money. Because he worked 3 jobs to put himself through graduate school and doesn't need anyone's handouts. Right now, he doesn't. But what happens when kids come along and he's looking at an easy life?" "You're disgusting," I said and hung up. Emma tried a different approach. She showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Saturday morning with her 2 kids in tow. "I brought the kids to see Aunt Sarah," she said, pushing past me into my living room. 6-year-old Tyler and 4-year-old Mia launched themselves at me for hugs, and my heart clenched. I adored these kids, and seeing them felt like both a blessing and a manipulation tactic. "Aunt Sarah, Mommy says you might not come to the farm anymore," Mia said in her sweet little voice. I shot Emma a furious look over Mia's head. "That's not exactly what I said." Emma defended herself. "I told them you might be making some changes." "Mommy also said Uncle Marcus might not be my uncle anymore," Tyler added helpfully. "Tyler, why don't you and Mia play with the toys in the corner?" I said, setting out some blocks I kept for their visits. Once the kids were occupied, Emma and I sat on the couch. "That was a low blow," I said. "I brought them because they love you," Emma said. "And because I want you to understand what you're giving up. It's not just the farm, Sarah. It's us. It's Sunday dinners and birthday parties and watching these kids grow up. It's being part of something bigger than yourself." "I don't want to give any of that up," I said, tears starting to form. "Why does it have to be a choice?" Emma's expression softened slightly. "Because Mom and Dad have made it one. And honestly, I understand why." "How can you understand this?" "Because I see what happened to the Hendersons' farm when their daughter married that developer from Chicago. He convinced her to sell off parcels for housing developments. Within 10 years, the farm was gone, and now there's a subdivision where 4 generations of corn used to grow. Marcus isn't a developer. He's an environmental engineer. If anything, he'd want to protect the land. Now, maybe. But people change, Sarah. Marriage changes people. What if he decides farming isn't profitable enough? What if he wants to move somewhere with better job opportunities for him? What if he wants to cash out his share when times get tough?" I stared at her, horrified by the calculation in her voice. "You're talking about my future husband like he's some kind of predator." "I'm talking about him like he's someone who has no roots in this place, no skin in the game, no understanding of what we've sacrificed to keep this farm alive." "And what about what I've sacrificed?" I asked. "What about the fact that I came back from college ready to work this farm, and Dad barely lets me contribute anything meaningful? What about the fact that I've sent dozens of reports and suggestions that could improve our yields, and Jake dismisses them because they came from a computer instead of experience?" "That's different." "How is it different?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Because you left, Sarah. You physically left, and now you want to bring in someone else who doesn't belong." "I left for college. Like you did. Like Jake did. We came back. I would have come back too, if there had been a place for me. But every time I tried to get involved, Dad acted like I was in the way. Because you were always trying to change things instead of learning how they worked first." I felt a surge of anger so strong it surprised me. "You mean I was trying to drag our operation into the 21st century instead of doing things exactly the same way great-great-grandpa did?" Emma stood up, her face flushed. "If that's how you really feel about the way we do things, then maybe Dad's right. Maybe you don't belong here anymore." She gathered up her kids and left, and I spent the rest of the day crying. The campaign against Marcus intensified over the following weeks. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about my relationship. My cousin Rebecca called to tell me she'd heard Marcus had been married before he hadn't. My Aunt Linda mentioned that she'd heard he had gambling debts, also false. Even our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, stopped by to share her concerns about mixed marriages and their challenges. The worst part was that Marcus began pulling away from me. Not intentionally, but I could feel it happening. He stopped talking about wedding plans. He worked later hours. He was quieter, more withdrawn. When I asked him about it, he just said he was thinking. One night, about 2 months after the family dinner, I came home to find Marcus sitting on our couch with a suitcase beside him. "What's happening?" I asked, though I was afraid. I already knew. "I think I should go stay at David's place for a while," he said quietly, referring to his best friend who lived across town. "Why?" He looked up at me with exhausted eyes. "Because every day I stay here, I'm ruining your life a little more. Your family hates me, your friends are questioning your judgment, and you're losing everything you grew up believing would be yours." "You're not ruining anything," I said desperately. "They are. They're the ones making this impossible." "Am I worth it, Sarah?" he asked quietly. "Am I really worth losing your family and your inheritance?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Of course you are." "Are you sure? Because I've been doing some thinking, and maybe there's a compromise here. Maybe we could have a long engagement, give your family time to come around. Maybe we could move closer to the farm, let them get to know me better. Maybe." "No," I interrupted. "No compromises. They're wrong, Marcus. What they're asking is wrong, and I won't reward it by giving in." But I could see the doubt in his eyes, and it terrified me. Marcus did stay at David's that night, though he came back the next evening. But something had shifted between us. The easy comfort we'd always shared was strained. We were both walking on eggshells, and the pressure from my family was taking its toll on both of us. Things came to a head 3 weeks later at my cousin Amy's wedding. Marcus and I had been invited months earlier, back when everyone still pretended to tolerate him. I debated not going, but Amy was one of the few family members who had always been kind to Marcus, and I didn't want to disappoint her. It was a mistake. The reception was held in the same community center, where I'd imagined having my own wedding. Marcus looked handsome in his navy suit, and I wore the blue dress he'd complimented when I bought it. For a few hours, we almost felt normal again, dancing and laughing and celebrating love. But during dinner, Dad approached our table. "Marcus," he said with false politeness, "mind if I borrow Sarah for a dance?" I didn't want to cause a scene, so I reluctantly took his arm and followed him onto the dance floor. "You look beautiful tonight," he said as we swayed to the music. "Thank you," I replied stiffly. "Reminds me of your mother when she was your age. She wore blue to our first dance as a married couple." I said nothing. "Sarah, I want you to know this ultimatum isn't easy for us either. Your mother cries herself to sleep some nights, worrying about losing you. Then don't lose me," I said. "Accept Marcus and move on." Dad shook his head. "I can't do that. I won't do that. This farm is bigger than any one person's feelings." "Even your daughters?" "Even my daughters." I pulled away from him. "Then I guess we have nothing more to talk about." As I walked back to our table, I heard him call after me. "The offer still stands, Sarah. Come home alone, and you'll always have a place with us." Marcus saw my face when I sat down and immediately asked if I wanted to leave. I nodded, and we made our excuses to Amy and slipped out early. In the car, Marcus was quiet for a long time before he finally spoke. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean I can't keep watching your family tear you apart. I can't keep being the reason you lose everything you love." "You're not the reason," I said desperately. "They are." "Does it matter? The result is the same." We drove home in silence, and I felt like my world was crumbling. That night, I called my best friend Jessica, who lives in Portland now but grew up on the neighboring farm. Through tears, I told her everything that had been happening. "Jesus, Sarah," she said when I finished. "Your family is out of their minds. Is it crazy that I'm even considering their ultimatum?" I asked. "The farm means so much to me. It's been my dream since I was little." Has it been your dream? Or has it been their expectation? I paused, considering her question. What do you mean? I mean, did you want to run that farm because you genuinely loved it, or because that's what was expected of the family legacy? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like they never really made space for your vision anyway. She was right, and it hurt to admit it. Every suggestion I'd made had been dismissed. Every attempt to modernize had been rejected. Even my college degree in agricultural business was treated like an interesting hobby rather than valuable expertise. Besides, Jessica continued, what kind of legacy are they really preserving? One built on conditional love and ultimatums. After we hung up, I spent the night walking around our apartment, thinking about Jessica's words. I looked at the photos on our walls, Marcus and me hiking in Colorado, at his graduation, at my promotion party, with his foster siblings who had become like family to me. I thought about the life we'd built together, the way he supported my dreams even when my own family didn't, the way he made me laugh even on my worst days. Then I thought about the farm, the rolling fields, the old oak tree I used to climb, the barn where I'd learned to milk cows, the legacy that tied me to generations of strong women who had worked that land. But I also thought about the reality of that legacy, the outdated methods, the resistance to change, the casual racism, the conditional love. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Dad before I could lose my nerve. I've thought about what you said, I told him when he answered. And I'm going to marry Marcus. With or without your blessing. The silence stretched out so long I thought he'd hung up. Then you've made your choice, he finally said. Yes, I have. And now you have to make yours. I already made mine. The will has been updated. Your name is off it. The finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut. Then I guess this is goodbye, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I guess it is. He hung up, and I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Marcus found me there when he came out of the bedroom. Who were you talking to? My father. I told him we're getting married, and he told me I'm officially disinherited. Marcus sat down beside me, his face grave. Sarah, we don't have to. Yes, we do, I interrupted. We do have to. Because I realized something last night. That farm was never really mine anyway. It was always conditional, on me staying, on me conforming, on me choosing them over everyone else, including my own happiness. That's not love, Marcus. That's control. Marcus took my hand. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That weekend, we went ring shopping for a wedding band to match my engagement ring. We set a date for the following spring. We found a beautiful venue in the mountains, 3 hours away from the farm. We sent out save the dates to our real friends and the few family members we thought might actually show up. Mom called 2 weeks later. Sarah, please, she said, and I could hear she'd been crying. Please don't do this. Come home and we'll talk it through. We did talk it through, Mom. You made your position very clear. We just want what's best for you. No, you want what's convenient for you. What's best for me is marrying the man I love and building a life that makes me happy. He'll leave you, she said desperately. Men like that always do. Then what will you have? Men like what, Mom? She couldn't answer because we both knew what she meant and we both knew it was ugly. I'll have my dignity, I finally said. And I'll have the knowledge that I didn't sell my happiness for land. You're making a mistake, Sarah. A huge mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. The wedding planning was bittersweet. Marcus's foster family embraced me completely. His foster mother, Patricia, insisted on helping with dress shopping, and his foster brother Jerome walked him down the aisle. My friend Jessica flew in from Portland to be my maid of honor. David, Marcus's best friend, was his best man. 3 people from my biological family showed up. My cousin Amy, my Aunt Ruth, Dad's youngest sister, who had always been the family rebel, and surprisingly, my grandmother on my mother's side, who was 89 years old and had driven herself 6 hours to be there. Your great-grandmother eloped, she whispered to me during the ceremony. Sometimes love is worth the risk. It was the most beautiful, intimate wedding I could have imagined. We said our vows under a canopy of aspen trees, with mountains rising in the background. Marcus cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. I cried when he promised to love me, even when your family drives us both crazy. The reception was small but perfect. Patricia gave a toast about how Marcus had never smiled as much as he did when he talked about me. Jessica told embarrassing stories from our childhood that had everyone laughing. Aunt Ruth got tipsy on champagne and loudly declared that my parents were idiots for missing this. Grandma pulled me aside during the dancing. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Even though I gave up the farm?" "Especially because you gave up the farm. That land has been both a blessing and a curse for our family. Every generation, someone sacrifices too much for it. I'm glad you chose differently." It was the validation I didn't know I needed. We honeymooned in Greece, and for 2 weeks, I barely thought about home. Marcus and I ate fresh seafood and explored ancient ruins and made love in a hotel room overlooking the Mediterranean. It felt like we were finally free to be ourselves without the weight of my family's disapproval hanging over us. But reality crept back in when we returned home. Jake called a month after the wedding. "Well, you did it," he said without preamble. "Yes, I did." "How's married life?" "Wonderful, actually." There was a pause. "Dad's not doing great." I felt a stab of guilt, followed quickly by anger. "That's not my fault, isn't it? You broke his heart, Sarah." "He broke mine first." He was trying to protect something he loves. So was I. Jake sighed. "Emma's pregnant again." "Congratulations," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Third grandchild he'll actually get to know," Jake added pointedly. "Jake, if you called to guilt me." "I called because Mom asked me to. She wants to know if there's any way to fix this." "Tell Mom the same thing I told Dad. Accept Marcus, and we can start rebuilding." "Don't, and we're done." "You're really going to let your pride destroy our family?" "My pride?" "Jake, I'm not the one who created this situation. You're the one who chose an outsider over your own blood. I chose love over hate. I chose acceptance over prejudice. I chose my own happiness over control. Whatever helps you sleep at night," he said, and hung up. These conversations happened every few months, one of my siblings or my mother calling to see if I was ready to come to my senses. Each time, I held firm. I'd made my choice, and I wasn't going back. Meanwhile, Marcus and I built a beautiful life together. We bought a small house with a big garden where I could indulge my love of growing things without the pressure of large-scale farming. Marcus got promoted to senior engineer at his firm. We traveled, we entertained friends, we adopted a ridiculous golden retriever named Benny, who thought he was a lap dog. We also started trying to have a baby, which led to some of the most difficult conversations of our marriage. What if our kids never know their grandparents? I asked one night, curled up against Marcus's chest. "They'll know Patricia and Jerome and all my foster siblings," he said. "They'll know Jessica and David and your cousin Amy. They'll have plenty of love. But they'll never know where half their heritage came from. They'll never hear stories about their great-great-grandmother who homesteaded that land, or learned to milk cows, or understand what it means to work with your hands." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," I said immediately. "Never about you. I grieve for what they'll miss." "Maybe they'll miss some things," Marcus said gently. "But they'll also miss the conditional love, the ultimatums, the pressure to conform. They'll grow up knowing they're accepted exactly as they are." He was right, but the grief was still real. 2 years after our wedding, Marcus and I were finally pregnant. I was 12 weeks along when cousin Amy called with news that changed everything. "Sarah," she said, her voice shaky, "I have to tell you something. Dad had a heart attack yesterday." My world tilted. "Is he okay?" "He's stable, but it was bad. He's in the ICU. I'll be there in 4 hours." "Sarah, wait. I have to tell you, Mom said she doesn't want you there." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" She said if you show up, it will upset Dad and make things worse." I sank into a chair, one hand instinctively going to my still flat belly. "Amy, he's my father." "I know. I'm so sorry." I tried to talk to her, but she won't budge. I hung up and sobbed for an hour. Marcus held me while I cried, not saying anything, just letting me grieve. I have to go, I finally said. I'll drive you. She said she doesn't want me there. I don't give a damn what she said. He's your father, and you're carrying his grandchild. So we went. I walked into that ICU waiting room with my shoulders back and my head high, Marcus's hand steady on my back. Mom looked up when we entered, her face going through a series of expressions, surprise, anger, and something that might have been relief. I told Amy. I don't care what you told Amy, I said quietly. I'm here to see my father. Jake and Emma flanked Mom like bodyguards. Emma's oldest child, Tyler, now 8, looked up from his coloring book and smiled. Aunt Sarah, Uncle Marcus. At least the kids were still happy to see us. How is he? I asked, directing the question to no one in particular. Critical but stable, a voice said from behind me. I turned to see Dr. Martinez, who had been our family doctor for 20 years. Sarah, I'm glad you're here. Mom shot him a sharp look, but he ignored it. Can I see him? Family only, and only for a few minutes at a time. I am family. Dr. Martinez nodded. Room 314. But Sarah, he's on a lot of medication, so don't be alarmed if he seems confused. I walked down that sterile hallway with my heart hammering. Dad looked so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and tubes, his face gray against the white pillow. Hi, Daddy, I whispered, taking his hand. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, he looked confused. Then recognition dawned. Sarah, I'm here. You came, he said, his voice barely audible. Of course I came. We looked at each other for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen in my father's eyes before. Regret. I'm pregnant, Daddy, I said softly. 12 weeks. His eyes widened, and his grip on my hand tightened. A baby? Your grandchild. Tears started rolling down his weathered cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know, Daddy. I know. I was wrong. About Marcus, about everything. I was so wrong. I squeezed his hand. We can fix this. When you get better, we can fix everything. But we both knew it might be too late. Too much had been said. Too much hurt had been inflicted. Dad pulled through the heart attack, but the recovery was long and difficult. During those weeks, something shifted in our family dynamic. Mom was forced to confront the possibility of losing her husband, and I think she realized how much time she'd already lost with her daughter. The first olive branch came in the form of a card in the mail, a simple thinking of you card with a note in Mom's handwriting. I hope you and the baby are healthy. Love, Mom. It wasn't much, but it was something. Marcus and I talked long and hard about what reconciliation might look like. We both agreed that any relationship moving forward had to be built on respect and acceptance. There could be no more ultimatums, no more conditions, no more subtle or not so subtle racism. I won't subject our child to that, Marcus said firmly. If they can't love and accept our baby exactly as they are, then it's better to have no relationship at all. I agreed completely. The breakthrough came when I was 7 months pregnant. I was huge and uncomfortable and probably shouldn't have been driving, but I had a craving for the apple cider donuts from the farmer's market near the old farm. It was a Saturday morning, and I thought I could slip in and out without seeing anyone I knew. I was wrong. I literally ran into Emma at the donut stand. Or rather, my enormous belly ran into her while I was trying to maneuver around a stroller. Sarah, she gasped. Hi, Emma. I looked down at my stomach, and then at her. Sorry, I'm not exactly maneuverable these days. She stared at my belly with an expression I couldn't read. You look beautiful. I look like a whale. No, you look like a pregnant woman. You're glowing. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before Emma asked, What are you having? A girl. A girl, she repeated softly. Do you have a name picked out? Elena Rose. Elena after Marcus's foster mother, Patricia Elena, and Rose after great-grandma. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You remembered great-grandma Rose. Of course I remembered her. Just because I'm not inheriting the farm doesn't mean I forgot where I came from. Sarah, Emma said urgently, can we talk? Really talk. I looked around the busy farmer's market. Here. My car's right over there. Please. I hesitated, then nodded. We walked to her minivan in silence, and I climbed into the passenger seat with some difficulty. Sarah, I owe you an apology, Emma said immediately. A huge apology. I waited. When Dad first made that ultimatum, I thought he was protecting the farm. I thought Marcus was a threat to everything we'd built. But watching what happened after you left, God, Sarah, we've been miserable. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. No, you don't understand. The farm is struggling. Jake and I don't have your education, your vision. We've been doing things the same old way and we're barely breaking even. Last month, we had to take out a loan just to cover the mortgage. I felt a stab of pain, both for the farm's troubles and for the vindication I didn't want to feel. But that's not even the worst part, Emma continued. The worst part is what it's done to our family. Tyler asks about you constantly. He doesn't understand why Aunt Sarah doesn't come to Christmas anymore. Mia drew you a picture for your birthday and cried when I told her we couldn't send it. My throat tightened. You could have sent it. Could I? Mom and Dad made it pretty clear that any contact with you was betrayal. And what changed? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Dad's heart attack. Sitting in that waiting room, thinking he might die, and realizing that you weren't there. That your children might never know their grandfather because of our stubbornness. It put everything in perspective. She turned to look at me directly. I was wrong, Sarah. We were all wrong. Marcus isn't the problem. Our pride is the problem. I felt tears starting, and I blamed it on pregnancy hormones. I've been wanting to call you for months, Emma continued. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if you'd ever forgive us. Emma, I said carefully, what exactly are you asking for? I'm asking for a chance to make this right. I'm asking you to consider letting us back into your life and your daughter's life. And Mom and Dad? Jake. Jake's coming around. He's proud, but he's not stupid.
He knows we need you.
And Mom misses you so much it's killing her. She just doesn't know how to admit she was wrong. What about Marcus? I asked pointedly. Any reconciliation has to include him. Full acceptance, no conditions, no subtle digs, no treating him like an outsider. I know, and you're right to demand that. He's your husband, the father of your child. We were awful to him, and we need to make amends. I stared out the windshield at the familiar landscape of my childhood, feeling a fragile hope beginning to bloom. It won't be easy, I said finally. There's a lot of hurt to work through. I know. But Sarah, will you try? Will you give us a chance? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw not the enemy who had sided against me, but the woman who used to braid my hair and help me with homework and hold me when I cried over broken hearts. One chance, I said. But Emma, if anyone treats Marcus with disrespect or makes racist comments or tries to exclude him, I'm done. For good this time. Understood. Completely understood. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Emma asked, Can I feel the baby kick? I smiled and guided her hand to the spot where Elena was currently doing gymnastics. Emma's face lit up when she felt the movement. She's strong, Emma said. Takes after her mom? I replied, and we both laughed. The reconciliation process was slow and sometimes painful. It started with a phone call from Mom a week after my conversation with Emma. Sarah, Mom's voice was shaky. Emma told me about your talk. I was wondering, could I come see you? Meet Marcus properly. Marcus and I discussed it extensively before agreeing. We invited her for dinner at our house, on our turf, where we felt comfortable and in control. Mom arrived with a baby gift, a handmade quilt she'd been working on in secret, featuring a pattern of roses that matched the wallpaper in Great-Grandma Rose's bedroom. I started this the day Emma told me you were pregnant, she admitted. I didn't know if I'd ever get to give it to her, but I had to make it anyway. It was beautiful, and it made me cry. The dinner was awkward but not hostile. Mom asked Marcus about his work, his foster family, his interests. She listened, really listened, when he talked about his plans for our daughter, his hopes for the future, his commitment to me and our family. "I owe you an apology," she said before leaving. "Several apologies, actually. I let fear and prejudice cloud my judgment, and I hurt people I love because of it." Marcus, gracious as always, simply said, "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do to fix them." Dad's apology came later and was harder one. He was still recovering from his heart attack when Marcus and I finally visited the farm again. I was 8 months pregnant by then, waddling like a duck and barely fitting behind the steering wheel. Dad was sitting on the porch when we pulled up, looking older and frilier than I remembered. He stood slowly as we approached. "Sarah, Marcus." He nodded to both of us. "Dad." We stood there for an awkward moment before Dad stepped forward and, to my surprise, extended his hand to Marcus. "I owe you an apology, son. A big one." Marcus shook his hand. "We all said things we regret." "No," Dad said firmly. "I said things I regret. You conducted yourself with more grace and dignity than I deserved." Dad turned to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "And you, sweetheart, I owe the biggest apology of all. I let my fear of change override my love for my daughter. I'm ashamed of myself." "Dad, let me finish. I was wrong about Marcus. I was wrong about the farm. I was wrong about everything. That land isn't worth losing you, and any legacy built on conditional love isn't worth preserving." I was fully crying now, pregnancy hormones and old grief combining into a flood of emotion. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. Both of you," he said, looking at Marcus. "All three of you," he added, glancing at my belly. Jake's reconciliation took the longest. He was the most resistant to admitting he'd been wrong, the most invested in the old ways of thinking. But eventually, even he came around, partly because of family pressure, partly because the farm really was struggling without my input, and partly because his own kids wore him down with constant questions about why they couldn't see Aunt Sarah anymore. Elena Rose was born on a beautiful spring morning, 3 weeks before her due date. She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a voice that could wake the dead when she was hungry. My entire family was at the hospital within hours of her birth. Mom cried when she held her first granddaughter. Dad's hands shook as he traced her tiny fingers. Emma brought flowers and practical gifts like diapers and burp cloths. Even Jake seemed smitten, making funny faces to make Elena smile. "She's beautiful," Mom whispered. "She looks just like you did as a baby. She has Marcus's eyes," I said, and for the first time, there was no tension when I mentioned my husband's features in our daughter's face. Marcus was an amazing father from day one. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floors during late-night crying sessions, and looked at Elena like she hung the moon and stars. Watching him with our daughter made me fall in love with him all over again. The first few months of Elena's life were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the steep learning curve of new parenthood. But they were also filled with joy I hadn't expected. Having my family back, really back, not just pretending, made everything better. Dad started calling regularly, just to check on Elena and hear about her latest milestones. Mom knitted an endless supply of tiny sweaters and hats. Emma and I became close again, bonding over the shared experience of motherhood. Even Jake warmed up, especially after Elena smiled at him during a family dinner. But the real test came when Elena was 6 months old, and Marcus and I were invited to Thanksgiving at the farm for the first time in 3 years. I was nervous about returning to the scene of so much conflict, about how it would feel to be back in that house where I'd been given the ultimatum that changed everything. "We don't have to go," Marcus said as I fretted over what to wear. "We can have our own Thanksgiving at home." "No," I said firmly. "We're going. I want Elena to know where half her family comes from. I want her to see the farm, to understand that history, even if it's not her inheritance." The day was surprisingly wonderful. Mom had gone all out with the cooking, making all my favorite dishes plus some Korean-inspired sides that Marcus had mentioned liking. Dad carved the turkey and told stories about past Thanksgivings, including Elena in the narrative as if she'd always been part of the family tradition. Jake's kids, now 10 and 8, were fascinated by baby Elena. They fought over who got to hold her, made faces to make her laugh, and proudly showed her around the farm like she was visiting royalty. "Want to see the barn where Mommy learned to milk cows?" Emma asked Elena, who gurgled happily in response. As we walked through the familiar spaces of my childhood, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness for the years lost, anger that still hadn't fully healed, but also gratitude that we'd found our way back to each other. The most meaningful moment came when Dad pulled Marcus aside after dinner. "Son, I want to show you something," he said, leading us all out to the south pasture where the late afternoon sun was painting the fields golden. "This is where Sarah used to play when she was little," Dad said. "She'd build fairy houses out of corn stalks and pretend she was the queen of the farm." "Dad," I protested, embarrassed. "It's true," he continued, smiling. "She had more imagination and love for this place than anyone. I was a fool to think loving you would diminish that." He turned to Marcus. "I want you to know, both of you, that you'll always be welcome here. Always. This is Elena's heritage too, and I want her to know it." "Thank you," Marcus said simply. "That means everything." As we drove home that evening, Elena sleeping peacefully in her car seat, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. "Good," I said, surprising myself. "Really good. It's not the same as it was before. We can't go back and undo all that hurt, but it's something new, and maybe something better." "Better how?" "Honest. Built on choice instead of obligation. They're in our lives now because they want to be, not because they have to be." Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, for standing up for us, for holding firm on what was right, but also for being willing to forgive." "I'm proud of you too. You handled all of this with more grace than anyone deserved." "We make a good team," he said. "The best team." The story doesn't end there, of course. Life rarely wraps up as neatly as stories do. Jake and I still clash sometimes over farm management. He's more open to my suggestions now, but change comes slowly. Mom and Dad are wonderful grandparents to Elena, but they're also aging, and I worry about their health. Emma and I are closer than we've ever been, united by motherhood and shared experience, but we still occasionally fall back into old sibling patterns. The farm itself is doing better. Jake finally implemented some of my suggestions about crop rotation and soil management, and they've seen improved yields. I consult for them occasionally, unofficially and unpaid, but it feels good to contribute my expertise to the place that shaped me. Marcus and I bought a bigger house when Elena turned 2, and we started trying for baby number 2. We chose a place with acreage, not farm-level acreage, but enough for a big garden, some chickens, and maybe a goat or 2 when the kids are older. I'm still connected to the land, just not tied to it the way I once was. Elena is 3 now, and she adores her grandparents, aunt, uncle, and cousins. She calls the farm Grandpa's house and loves visiting to see the animals and run through the fields. She doesn't know about the years when Mommy and Daddy weren't welcome there, and hopefully she never will. Sometimes people ask if I regret my choice, if I wish I'd taken the easier path, given up Marcus, and secured my inheritance. The question always baffles me. How could I regret choosing love over fear? How could I regret standing up for what was right? How could I regret the life Marcus and I have built together, the daughter we're raising, the family we've created? The farm would have been nice to inherit, sure. The financial security, the connection to family history, the satisfaction of continuing a legacy, all of that has value. But it was never worth selling my soul for. Besides, I've learned that legacy isn't just about land or money or blood relations. Legacy is about the values you pass down, the love you share, the example you set for the next generation. Elena will grow up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions. She'll know that her parents chose each other and fought for their family. She'll know that standing up for what's right sometimes comes with a cost, but it's always worth paying. She'll also know her extended family, her heritage, her roots. She'll run through the same fields I did, learn to identify crops and seasons and weather patterns. She'll hear stories about great-great-grandmother Rose and understand where half her DNA comes from. But she'll grow up in a world where those things are gifts, not chains. Where family love is freely given, not conditionally granted. Where her worth isn't tied to other people's expectations or fears. That's the legacy I want to leave her. And that's worth more than any farm. I still think about that night sometimes. The family dinner where Dad delivered his ultimatum, the choice I was forced to make, the path that led us here. I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently, if I'd given in to the pressure and broken up with Marcus. I don't think I could have lived with myself. I don't think I would have been happy, even with the farm, even with my family's approval. Because I would have known that their love came with strings attached, that I'd purchased their acceptance by sacrificing my own integrity. The farm is beautiful and family is important, but neither is worth betraying yourself for. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their worst instincts. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to find out what's truly worth keeping. I lost an inheritance, but I gained a marriage built on mutual respect and unconditional love. I lost the easy path, but I found my own strength and voice. I lost the approval of people who should have loved me no matter what, but I gained the knowledge that I can stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Most importantly, I gained a daughter who will never doubt that she is loved exactly as she is, and a husband who chose to build a life with me based on who we really are, not who others expected us to be. That's not a trade I'll ever regret making. As I write this, Elena is napping in her toddler bed upstairs, and Marcus is in the kitchen making dinner. In a few hours, we'll sit down to eat together, just the three of us, in the home we've built with our own hands and hearts. Tomorrow is Sunday, and we'll drive to the farm for family dinner, something that would have seemed impossible 4 years ago. Elena will play with her cousins, I'll help Mom with dessert, and Marcus will talk shop with Dad about the new irrigation system they're considering. It's not the life I planned when I was a little girl dreaming of inheriting the family farm. But it's a better life than I ever could have imagined. Sometimes the best inheritance is the courage to forge your own path. Update: thank you so much for all the responses and support. I know this was a long read, but I wanted to share the whole story because I think there are probably other people out there facing similar ultimatums from family members. A few people have asked about updates, so here's where we are now. Elena is thriving and absolutely loves her big extended family. She has no idea about the drama that happened before she was born, and that's exactly how we want it. Marcus and I are expecting baby number 2 in the spring, another girl. Elena is very excited to be a big sister. The farm is doing much better financially since they implemented some of my suggestions. Jake actually asked me last month if I'd consider coming on as an official consultant, which feels like a huge step forward. Mom and Dad are talking about updating their will again to include Marcus and me, but honestly, we don't need it. We've built our own financial security, and more importantly, we've built a family based on love instead of conditions. For anyone dealing with family ultimatums, it's scary to stand up for yourself, but it's worth it. The people who truly love you will find their way back. The ones who don't, well, maybe they weren't worth keeping anyway. Thanks again for listening to my story. It feels good to share it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.